We'll gonna get going in just.
Get going here. This is a meeting with town meeting members. Members of the finance committee are here as well. Sorry, my video is not working right now, but I'll fix it in a second. We have two articles, Article 12 and 13, before town meeting. The first is a land acquisition at 290 Washington Street, as you can see, and then the land disposition at Waterfield parking lot. And we'll start with Article 12. As many of you know, we've referred to this over the years as the CVS lot, where there was a potential build to suit CVS project there in the works for a number of years that the developer got tied up in land court, and the project ended up being put on hold for a long period of time. And then when the land court decided against the proponents, was reverted back to the owners. And then when one of the owners passed away, it went to his children. So there's been several stops and starts in this project. To make a long story short, it's as you can see from the picture, it's been not in great shape for a long period of time. The town has engaged in a housing production plan. As many of you know, our focus is to really engage the certain sites around the town to put in affordable housing units to meet our requirement of 10% of subsidized housing inventory. So this was identified as one of the potential sites. At this point, that there is a new owner. Nothing has happened with the property in a while. So we have worked with one of the prior owners that was going to develop it, and that fell through during COVID. So we feel like this is a good project for us to move forward on, as it is been treading water and been really a blight to the area and a prime location for housing. So I'll turn it over. We've had several consultants on this project work with us, and what we wanted to identify is how plausible a project like this would be, and if it was financially secure for us, and have an idea of what we could build there. So I think we'll start with Maura Songus and Cliff Bomer, who are feasibility consultants for us, to go over the project, or who, I'm not sure who's jumping in next, if it's Brian or Cliff, but I'll hand it over. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Mike. I'm just gonna quickly go. I had some slides here that Mike touched on, and I'm gonna hand it on over. So this is just the language that's in Article 12, the vote to authorize the select board to acquire this piece of land, whether through purchase, donation, eminent domain, or otherwise, in order to raise sum of up to the assessed value, which is 3.15 million, for the purposes of related thereto. So the site, as we saw earlier, is this is Washington and Swanton Street, and it's these three parcels here, that is the site location. The site was previously proposed as CVS, like the chair said, in 2014. It was subsequently appealed and upheld, and the site's been vacant since. There was a proposed friendly 40B, another one version of the comprehensive permit is what's known as a local initiative project, or a LIP. That was in 2019 with the Melanson development. That did stall as the COVID-19 did affect the lending. So the Melanson proposal was a 3.5-story structure, about 60 units, and it was 25% affordable. These were not rental, so it was only the 25% would count, so 15 units. This was mixed use, so commercial on the first floor, and this was generally well received by the neighborhood. And now I'm going to turn it over to Cliff Bomer and Maura Songus, who helped us with the feasibility of the site in terms of what we could potentially do. So why don't you take it away, Cliff?
Sure. Hi, I'm Cliff Bomer. I'm an architect at Davis Square Architects in Somerville. We do a lot of multifamily housing, and our charge was to really look at what's feasible on the site from a variety of perspectives. Certainly fit with the neighborhood, reasonable parking ratios, scale of buildings, and what's financeable by available sources for this type of development. So we looked at 3 different schemes. You may or may not know that the site is a little bit under 1.2 acres, so somewhere around 52,000 square feet. It's a relatively easy site to develop, very flat. So there are a number of options for laying it out. The main things we looked at were ideas for enhancing the streetscape, both on Swanton and Washington Street, as well as I said, keeping buildings in the scale of nearby architecture. We didn't really look at mixed use schemes. Each of these three schemes that range from 42 to 50 apartments are solely residential developments. Quickly describe each one of these schemes. The first scheme is a total of 42 apartments. It's a mixture of home ownership and multifamily with 44 parking spaces. The goal was to, as I said, maintain a nice streetscape with the buildings in scale with the very nearby architecture, and the notion of doing a mixed deal that has both rental and townhouse has some real advantages as far as accessing some funding sources. So this one kind of checked all the boxes from a feasibility perspective and introduced both the notion of having home ownership units. It has some advantages over rental units. In this scheme, the larger rental building is right on Washington Street. And then there's a wrap of the home ownership to the west of the large building and directly facing Swanton Street, laid out in a way so that the parking isn't really visible from the street. Scheme 2 is a different idea. This is one probably a little more similar to the previously proposed project for the site. It's one building. Again, we're looking in this study at solely residential. This is actually a 2.5-story building, so it's not even a full 3-story building. We think we could fit 50 apartments in a building that would have a sloped roof, so the full 2 stories and then a 3rd story that would be up within a roofscape. And in that kind of footprint that again puts the parking back not visible from the street and maintains a reasonable scale of a building, could contain, we think, 50 apartment units and 50 parking spaces. And the last scheme is another version of the mixed scheme. This is a total of 44 units. The idea of this one was to put potentially the larger apartment block to the left where the arrow was a second ago on the west side of the site. Could be 2.5 stories facing the street. So you get the short elevation of the bigger building facing the street, which, as you can see directly across the street in plan, is similar dimensions to the houses across the street. And perhaps the southern end of the building could rise up to a full 3 stories. So you can get a larger unit count with a very little impact on existing buildings, and then wrap the 2 existing residential frontages along Swanton and Washington Street with smaller scale home ownership townhouse units. And in this one, we actually ended up with, again, a 1-to-1 parking ratio of 14 townhouse spaces and 30 multifamily spaces. I want to really emphasize that these are really feasibility studies. They're not specific recommendations by any means, but from our own experience of developing a lot of multifamily developments, that we think all 3 of these are reasonable options and could be, could really happen with really minimizing impact on neighboring existing structures and still fulfill goals of increasing the affordable housing units in the town. So that's what we looked at, and where you're looking at 3 schemes. There are obviously more schemes available, but these we think are within the realm of reasonable design and could be fundable as well.
Thanks, Cliff. I don't know if anyone else from the team wanted to speak. Otherwise, I think we'd turn it back to Mike. But
Yeah, thanks, Brian. We're going to be kind of moving quickly through these because we really want to get to questions. I know it's a lot for people that are seeing this for the first time, but as I mentioned before, this was, and as you can see from Brian's screen, if you can see that, it was this was identified as one of the locations for development in our housing production plan. I think that we got very close to something with the prior developer, and it was presented to the neighborhood who actually really appreciated the design and where we got. So what we need to do is through town meeting is acquire the land. And we would move through a RFP process like we did with the Waterfield lot recently. So what we did in Waterfield is we did a RFQ, which is a request for qualifications, and identified developers that we wanted to work with based on our specific criteria. We actually got a very high level of return as far as the quality of developers that responded. And then we developed an RFP request for proposal based on our motivations for affordable housing due to the housing production plan and our needs in Winchester. So we would develop those, hopefully get responses, and then move forward. So the part that is in question probably for some town meeting members is, how do we pay for it if we're going to acquire it? And what we propose to do is use the money that town meeting put into the Affordable Housing Trust in order to service debt on a bond issuance, a temporary bond issuance, a ban, which would then, when the developers purchase the property from us based on our response to the RFP, that would then return that money to the Affordable Housing Trust. So in that sense, we see this as a possibility for the town to get a great outcome as far as housing production, but also hold the town harmless financially. So that's why we really spent some time working with Cliff and Maura on the feasibility side of it, as well as our counsel, Mark Bobrowski, and his team, and Mina Macarius. So I think we can move forward to the next slide, Brian.
so that was actually all we had for
Okay.
Article 12. We were going to open it up to questions. The easiest way is by far through the question and answer function through the webinar. It looks like we have a couple of questions. I don't know if this is a direct question. It says and I guess this is for anyone from the town, but we're going to be going through these questions. That's why we're here. So if you could use the question and answer function, that would be great. So it says here, the town does not have a good record with buying land for development, which were sold on the basis that the sale would cover the cost of the acquisition, which turned out to not be the case. Do you remember the Wright Lock Farm fiasco? Again, I don't know if this is a direct question that we can answer, but I guess yes is the answer to that question. But if anyone would, if the questioner would like to further that question, if you have any, if you need any information, that's why we're here. So the floor is certainly open for the next while. Looks like Mr. Conti has his hand raised, which might be the quickest way to go about this. So why don't we see if we can elevate him so that he can do that. Let's see here. All right, Tony, you should be able to unmute yourself and go right ahead.
Yeah, Brian, I'm concerned about, I go back a ways. I remember what happened with Wright Lock Farm, where the town took on a lot of debt on the theory that we were going to get be paid back. And, it just didn't work out that way. And we're in a difficult financing situation right now. And I'm concerned that we're taking quite a risk. And we're also dumping a very dense development in the middle of a basically a 1 and 2 family neighborhood with the proposals that I've seen have inadequate parking. I know that these are only conceptual; they're not any firm proposals, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of room for parking on this lot based on the examples that were given. So we're going to be, dumping a lot of units in a tight spot with limited parking and taking a substantial risk on the town's part. That we'll be able to recover the cost of acquisition. I'm skeptical. Count me as skeptical.
Yeah, thanks, Tony.
Precinct 2 town meeting member.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate you being here and your question. This is Mike Betancourt, Chair of the Select Board, and Susan Verdicchio, Vice Chair, is here as well. And we have council here as well as a town manager, and Brian Zacchelli, our town planner. I think that the Right Lock Farm is not really the best example. That was a very different project that the town fell into. That was actually developer. As you remember, the developers had purchased this property. It fell through, and there was quite a few members of the community that wanted to preserve that as a farm and put it into open space, which is really what ended up happening, right? So I think what we see here as this is going to be developed one way or another, and I think that we've really seen the possibilities with the location, and it just turns out, as it did with Right Lock Farm, that the financing fell through for one of the parties that we had worked with for a long time. But prior to that, there was quite a bit of interest from developers on this parcel. It was actually briefly put up for auction, and then it was withdrawn from auction, and there was a lot of developer interest. We've seen with the Fells Hardware location, with the 10 Converse Place, Waterfield. We believe that Winchester property is very attractive to developers. And as Cliff said, this is a very buildable lot. And there's going to be housing and construction here one way or another, and it's going to be dense. And so what we want to do is accelerate that and try to find a developer that can work with the town to put forward what works best for the community and the neighborhood. I mean, frankly, the neighborhood's gone through quite a bit there over the years, and really was a David versus Goliath battle for a few years, and in the courts with trying to keep really unwelcome CVS property out of there. So we know the neighbors realize that there's going to be housing there. They've liked some of the concepts that we've put forward in the past, and coming off the Waterfield project, we're very confident that we'll get the right developer for the right space, and we'll be in control of what happens there. So certainly there are always variables there, but this is not going to be a preserved property. We're going to immediately move to turn this into as much affordable housing as possible, and some mixed use commercial space as well. And anyone else can jump in to answer that question for Tony.
Well, this leads right into the next question that's related. I'm not meaning to close the other question because I think that's an expansion of the question. It says, can you explain why town ownership of the property is expected to draw a successful developer buyer when there isn't interest currently? I think you've kind of answered that portion, that there has been interest, but it says, what about this will change the current dynamics? I think you've answered portions of it, but I don't know if you wanted to expand on that, Mike.
Sure, I can jump into that, Brian. This is Mike Betancourt again. I think that, as I mentioned, we're confident coming off of a lot of the response that we've seen from our local development, that this can be turned into something great for that area. So I think that what's happened kind of in the past is the property, it passed from one owner to his children over a period of time who disagreed on the disposition of that land and what was to be built there. So I think that there was a lot of time where even between the CVS situation in court, there was disagreement amongst the existing owners. So it still hasn't been resolved. And I think that where the town can get involved is we can purchase it and we can turn it into an RFP process and identify a developer immediately. And we have been successful at performing those partnerships. And so, as I mentioned, looking at the next article a little farther ahead, I think that we've seen the high quality of development that's out there.
Hi, this is Susan Verdicchio. I just wanted to add a little, just another angle, and that is that the town is currently in a safe harbor under the 40B law, the affordable housing law. And in order to stay in that position so that we are not running the risk of a developer coming in and on this lot or some other parcel of land, building something that does not have to follow our zoning at all. In order to stay in that safe harbor, we do need to be building affordable units and adding those units into our town inventory. And so that is our very narrow goal here and well defined, which makes it a little bit, different than say Winning Farm or Right Lock Farm. We have a sort of defined goal, smaller parcel of land. We know that this is a location that developers would be looking to develop. And we think this isn't really an opportunity to control what goes there and stay in safe harbor under the 40B law. That's it. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Susan. We have another question. Please keep them coming. These are good questions. So none of the schemes shown included any commercial space. Is it the intention of the town to pursue housing only options as opposed to mixed use? It's a pertinent question, obviously, because the previous schemes that were before the neighborhood did have a mixed use portion due to the neighborhood requesting that some type of amenity outside of housing would be along that site. So I think this is open to select board members to answer.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I think that certainly would be a component of the RFP that we put out there, and we would hope to get some portion of mixed use there. And I think part of it is just our perception of what it was for many years and how successful that was. So there, were stores and shops that people use and they access locally on foot. And so I think that it would complement the neighborhood to have some mixed use there. There's a financial component when you're dealing with affordable housing as well. When you're maximizing your affordable housing units, that means you have to kind of offset the investment of the developer in it with the market rate units that you're really losing. So it's tricky, and I think that's why we spent so much time and energy on the feasibility piece to say, hey, will this idea work? And as Brian mentioned, the previous scheme that we had worked on with the prior developer before they had left the project was one that did include mixed use there. And we've seen where maybe in other areas around the greater Boston area where maybe the mixed use hasn't been as successful, we've seen it's a part of the projects that have coming forward in Winchester. The Fells Hardware project that's being proposed and in permitting, Fells Hardware is going to stay there at ground level. The Civico project at the Waterfield lot we'll talk about in a little bit, that has a component of ground level retail or office space as well. And same thing with the 10 Converse Place project. So the developers that we've seen that have responded to Winchester, they believe that that mixed use piece is an important part of the building. So we think so too.
All right. Thanks for that. I am not seeing any more questions in the chat or anyone's hand raised at the moment. Oh, we have one hand here. Stephanie, why don't you unmute yourself and go right ahead.
Hey, thank you. And I'm sorry if I'm being dense, but to continue my question earlier, I just am unclear. Is the current owner not willing to develop? Like, is this just an opportunistic thing where the town has a chance to purchase the land and have a say in the developer, in which case that sounds fabulous? Or is there something wrong with the current owner? Like, I just don't, their website seems kind of defunct, but I'm not clear what the situation is with the current owner.
We haven't, we've spoken with the current owner who took over the ownership back, I think, maybe almost a year ago now. We haven't seen a formal proposal come through, although we've spoken with them. I think that their plan did not include affordable housing, which was a component that we very much required with the prior proposal that we've been dealing with all prior proposals that we've been wanting to work with, and it was more focused on senior housing. We feel that what we've seen so far is that there's really nothing continuing to happen with the property, and we can't continue to wait for something to organically happen in the location. And we feel that it's in very high demand. It's very buildable. And I think that it would really, it's really exactly what the town needs now. So we're, as I said, we're very encouraged by the responses that we've been getting. But as far as the current owners, we haven't seen a full, there hasn't been any applications, and only some just general conceptual discussions with them.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Mike, I think it's back in your court at the moment. Right now, I see no open questions. I see, oh, I have one saying that means the town would have to condemn the property. I do not believe that would be the case. I don't know if we had legal representation. This would be a potential eminent domain taking, or just a deal, not necessarily condemn. I don't know why there would be condemning of the property.
Right.
Yeah, I think either Mina or Mark Bobrowski could take that question. Mina, I saw you jump in.
Sure, and Mark, feel free to jump in as well. Brian, I think the word condemn might be used here in the eminent domain sense. It's another way to say take by eminent domain. The ask for town meeting is to give the select board the authority for all of the options, including eminent domain, if we are able to reach an agreement to purchase a property. That would be one way to do it, but often towns seek the entire suite of authority for ways to acquire property. Says gift as well if the property owner is listening, and we can get, once you have that authority, you can then narrow to the one the board actually needs to use to get the deal done.
Thanks, Mina. Maybe the questioner is old enough to remember the days when you had to have a blighted location in order to exercise eminent domain, but that part of the law ended about 50 years ago.
Thanks for all that info. We have a few more questions coming in. With the 3 feasibility options shown, how many units would be anticipated to be affordable and actually add to the SHI? So looking here at feasibility, one, the way that this would work is that the multifamily in the front here is 26 units. These would be rental, 25% of them would be affordable. So all of these would count. So that's at least 26 right there. And then these are the home ownership, and 25% of these would be affordable, but only those 4 would count. So it would be, in this case, it would be 30 affordable units would get on the SHI.
Yep.
For feasibility study 2, this would be a rental property, so all 50 would apply. This is this other hybrid model where you would have all 30 of these, and I guess 3, so about 33 for this one. So somewhere in the 30 to 35 range there.
Yep.
Another question potentially for legal here says there's a small part of the property which has unclear title. I don't know if there's any knowledge of that, but I would defer to counsel.
Certainly, if there, I'm not sure what that exactly refers to, but eminent domain takings would get rid of any title issues as well. Even if there was a negotiated sale, another advantage of having the authority to do eminent domain is often you negotiate a friendly taking to address title issues.
I agree with Mina. That's exactly right. It's a wonderful cure-all.
All right, we're going to keep on going down the line here. How many parking spaces would be required for existing zoning? So this is it's an interesting question because housing is not allowed here. So we're in the GBD1, so housing of any kind is not allowed. So, but generally, in other zones that are similar, you're looking at anywhere from 0.75 to 2 spaces for residential. But here, housing isn't even allowed in the first place, and this is why, rather than completely changing the zoning or doing an overlay district, it makes sense for the proximity to downtown for this to be a mixed income project. So sorry I didn't answer, Tony, if you wanted a follow-up question, because there is no parking ratio for this zone is the short answer.
And to follow up to Brian, something that we haven't mentioned yet is that the process for both these articles actually is for us to ask for legal authority to come up with plans and then come back to the town meeting in spring with final plans. And during that time, we anticipate engaging the neighborhood and representatives from town meeting and the finance committee in that process. So we see it as very collaborative and very similar to how we did we identified the developer for the Waterfield lot. So I think that the look and feel of the building is important to the neighborhood, as well as the use of it, and in addition to the affordable housing. So we think we can get all of those things, and we absolutely have created a process that will be inclusive of input from the neighborhood residents and town meeting members.
If I could make one comment about the parking, and I think that any of these schemes, I think what I'd say is that there's even flexibility. Again, we were trying to balance all the typical criteria that are looked at to make projects feasible. But for example, the project relative to parking, the project that's on the screen right now, number 3, could, all other factors being in alignment with that, if you imagine an entry into the north side of the multi-family building that could access parking, subgrade parking under the foundation of the building, for example. If that worked out in the bigger picture to be feasible, that could well be another 20 parking spaces that could get added to the project. So I think that the only point I'm making is these schemes weren't specifically about maximizing parking or even maximizing unit counts. They were just based on kind of a multi-factor feasibility.
Thanks, Cliff. And the other thing that we've seen as we've been through different 40B projects recently is that Mass Housing has really indicated to us that they want to see those units for families. So I know that there's been a question of, well, can't we just make this, housing for seniors and not have an impact on the school system? And that's the clear answer from Mass Housing and DHCD is no. That's the goal of 40B is to provide access to young families that's affordable education in Winchester. So just something to add.
All right, looks like we have one final question. We're a little on time here. Candace Van Aken, why don't you go right ahead?
Okay, thank you. Is one parking space per unit realistic? I just can't imagine 44 families having one car apiece.
In terms of realistic, this is certainly over the past several years, when I say about 10, this is the push from not only the state but also from many members in town, and we don't all agree on this, but the idea of cutting down the need for parking with proximity to the train, and although this property is not in the center business district, you can easily walk to the train in 5 to 10 minutes. The parking ratio for the downtown, which obviously would be a 1 or 2 minute walk, is 0.75. This is something that is certainly, like Cliff said, this is malleable. This is not to say that this is the parking ratio we're going to have. It's going to be 1-to-1 if everything works out perfectly. The idea also that, like Mike had said, is that we're going to be talking with the community throughout this process. It's not like we're just going to issue an RFP without a lot of neighborhood involvement. And we have a good track record with that from the most recent RFP that we did for the Waterfield lot. So we're trying to get as much input as possible. Nothing that you've seen on the boards today is in stone.
Can I add two things to that, Mike?
Please.
The matter can be somewhat addressed in the leases, and so there is control to be had there. I just finished working on a project in downtown Norwood at the train station. It's an old building that was used for a printing company, no longer feasible for that purpose. And it was converted into, I think, a total of 44, 46 units, studios 1s and 2s. It's a 40R project. And on site, there's one space for every unit. And that is now occupied and it's working fine as far as I know. So it's a place you can visit if you'd like. It's called Regal Lofts, and it's just, as I said, south of downtown Norwood.
Maybe, okay, we got one more. It says, has there been any analysis of or conversation with the school board about the impact to number of students at Morocco and how that may help or impact the attempts to get Morocco selected with the state for renovation? I am not aware of those conversations. I will say that the town is not allowed to kind of deny projects due to the addition of school-age children, but I don't know on the select board side if there have been any talks about this with the school board.
The school board, I mean, the school committee has been very much a part of the housing production plan process, as well as the recent master plan process that the planning board put forward. So there's an awareness of the continuing enrollment pressure that we face, even organically without the 40Bs coming online. We still see increases in enrollment. While we're still in the feasibility stage with the Lynch School, we feel it's unlikely to be pushed into another project. And I don't know that the town could handle that, even if we right now, if we had that approved by the MSBA. But we envision Morocco is still a little far out. We're probably not going to be opening the doors to a new Lynch until 2025 or so. So it will be some time after that, Morocco. But we do think the River Street project that came online was a huge impact for pushing us over the edge with Lynch. So I think when MSBA sees that we are making progress with our housing production plan and bringing young families into Winchester, they do see that it meets their goals and objectives as well. So it certainly, I think, could have an impact on Morocco, but we're still, honestly, a ways away in Morocco.
Right, Mike, I'm not seeing any more questions related to Article 12.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And we'll keep moving, and anyone can email us with questions and email the town manager's office or select board members, and we'll get back to you too. We just want to get everybody to have a feeling of what we're doing and be in a position to ask live questions, but we'll take others on that as well. So, and we'll move on to Article 13.
All right, so we're going to move on to Article 13. So this has to do with the vote to authorize the select board to lease the plan of land known as the Waterfield lot for a term of 99 or fewer years. This was based upon the request for proposal by the town in July. We had some help on this RFP, most notably from Mass Housing and Francis Goya's Floor, as well as the JM Goldson team with Barry Fradkin, who's here with us tonight, as well as Jennifer Goldson. So I'm actually going to turn it over to Barry Fradkin to introduce the project and specifically related to Article 13, the Waterfield lot. Barry, we'll see if we'll get you situated here and you can take it away.
All right. Thanks, Brian. Hi, everyone. My name is Barry Fradkin. I'm a community planner with James Goldson, and I've been working with the town almost a year now on this project. So I just want to give you a little bit of background on the project and where we are in the timeline. This is a partnership, as Brian mentioned, between Town of Winchester and Mass Housing, really coming out of the whole housing production plan process and the housing needs and strategies that were identified through that. Brian, you can go ahead. Looking back at the timeline, that housing production plan was done in 2017, 2018, and then that led into this RFQ process, the request for quotations, where we had people submit their qualifications and basically tell us some recent projects they've worked on, why they would be qualified to work on this multi-family housing project on the Waterfield site. And then based on the teams that were selected through that process, they were invited to participate in this request for proposals that started over the winter. January, we did the review of the RFQ. June, we went through a draft RFP, and we had a group of people from different town committees and boards working with us to come up with the criteria for that. We had a public meeting. We released that RFP, and then after a couple months, we closed that, and we had 6 responses, 5 of which met the minimum criteria. And now we're working towards, now that the town has selected their top choice for the proposal, and then we're working towards a land disposition. And then 2021 will be, assuming all goes well with that final negotiation process, we'll be working towards the design of the final project, permitting, financing, and construction. So there were 3 main redevelopment objectives that went into this request for proposals. First, the mixed income housing, a preference toward rental units, majority of those units for households earning between 30 and 120% of the area median income, and at least 25% of those units for households earning less than 80% of the area median income. Also making sure that 10% of those units include 3 bedrooms, and this has to do with some of the low income housing financing requirements, and also to make sure it gets included on the SHI. For design considerations, obviously being in the historic downtown, we want to make sure that it integrates with the surroundings and the neighborhood. considering the scale, the height, and the massing of the building, and providing public amenities and access for neighboring businesses that need to get in behind the businesses for deliveries. Also, environmental sustainability was a big one, trying to minimize, if not eliminate, fossil fuel use through all electric construction and incorporating other non-energy features, including landscaping, water runoff, etc. So there was a series of criteria that were used to select the developers. The minimum criteria are just sort of yes or no, did they meet these criteria? Meeting all the requirements in the RFP, a minimum of 5 years affordable housing experience, minimum of 25% of the units affordable, a track record of 3 or more projects, and the financial capacity of these development teams to cover 2 times the pre-development budget. The comparative criteria was ranked from basically meets the criteria highly advantageous, advantageous, or not advantageous relative to each of these criteria listed here. I won't go through the full list, but it includes affordability, design, sustainability, parking, collaboration with towns, and also how they handle the land disposition and the timeline for the project. So here's the proposal that was selected as the number 1 by the select board. This is from Civico and Tregorth. And the project concept includes 60 rental units with a mix of studios and 1 to 3 bedroom units, be about 3 to 4 stories, 40 to 48 feet high. And we'll have a mixed use gateway in the front, which would include some retail at street level, and also a public courtyard that would provide access to the new train station, or the redeveloped train station, I should say. There'll also be solar panels and roof gardens to help with the sustainability part of it. Also 40 public parking spaces at grade level and additional resident parking below grade. So this definitely had more parking than a lot of the other proposals. Also keeps the Chamber of Commerce building and would maintain that as some sort of a community use, ideally hosting the Chamber of Commerce going forward. Also would have a third-party property manager that would offer support services for residents, and they'd be seeking small business retail tenants to occupy that space at the front. The next steps really is just leading into the negotiation with the development team, working towards the land disposition at the town meeting, and then that design, permitting, and financing throughout next year. And then just to thank everyone who was involved with the project, town manager Brian, Francis from Mass Housing, and then Jen, who couldn't make it tonight.
Thanks so much, Barry. It's now open. It's open now to the floor for questions, either through the hand raising function or the question and answer function at the bottom of your screen. So the floor is open.
And just to give a little bit more background, I know that we've mentioned it, but this process specifically at Waterfield has been almost 20 years in the making. So it's been identified as a beneficial use for the location to support town center businesses, being near transit, especially with the new MBTA station. You know, we feel with the mix of housing and retail and commercial, it's really a great project. It's taken us a while because it's a complicated site. There's a MWRA sewer easement that runs right down the middle, and so where you've seen on the concept drawing from Civico, that archway there is a way to provide access to that easement there, because we wouldn't have the authority to build over that location. So we were looking for the best housing options, but also the select board felt, and many of the community stakeholders, that parking was essential here as well. So this was one of the sites, as Barry mentioned, that really offered quite a bit of what we were looking for.
So there was one question in the that I ended up answering in the chat function, but the question was, what is the net impact on parking? So currently there's about a total of 80 spots there right now, about 50 spots for commuters and 30 that are 2 to 3 hour spots or town center employees. And that 80 total public spots could potentially go down to 40 public spots. That is what Civico is proposing. That could change, but that is the proposal right now. So we go from about 80 to about 40.
And just to also put a finer point on it, we've been working with the Chamber of Commerce, the Planning Board, residents, other community stakeholders on this project to identify exactly what we're looking for. We really came out with a great option here. And part of what the Chamber has asked us to do is also to do a parking study of the entire town center, really, as we're doing these development projects and some other safety projects as well, infrastructure projects. We are losing spaces here and there, and we realize it does add up. And one of our goals is to activate the town center for our businesses to support them. So we realize that parking is part of that. So the select board will be engaged in that process moving forward as well.
It says here, next question, how many parking spaces are for the rental units? I believe that it is what was required by the zoning, which is 0.75. But I can, if we hold up a minute, I can get those numbers, or if someone else, because I only have one screen here, could get those numbers while we're talking here. But I do believe it was right around 1. So if there were, or sorry, 0.75. So if there were 60 units, that would be 45 spaces. But hopefully we will get that detailed answer before the end of this session. Next, I'll go into the next question.
A quick one. I looked at the proposal. It looks like they said they could make a case for lower level parking of 45 spaces.
So that makes sense for that at 0.75, which is the required amount of parking in the center business district. So it would be 45 spaces for the 60 units. That's right next to the train, and then there would be potentially 40 more spaces for public. Again, this is still not set in stone, and Civico has been very clear that they're willing to work with the town to get what we want. Good question. How many units would count towards the 40B goal? So all of these projects are 25% affordable rental projects. So all of the units counted, not just for Civico, but for all 5 projects that they got to this round, all of them would have counted. All the units count towards the 40B goal, meaning towards the subsidized housing index. I have a question for the select board, or potentially legal. What is the benefit of leasing the Waterfield property versus selling it outright to a developer? So obviously the short answer is control, is that we would have control over that property, so that it could come back to town meeting in a number of years, rather than just losing complete control after. But if anyone else wanted to chime in, but the short answer is, what is the benefit of leasing? It's control over the property. Looks like I've answered that.
Brian, this is Mina. The only other thing I would add to that, it's a variation on control. While you can get control for certain aspects, like an affordable housing restriction, or easements, et cetera, for the town, having a landlord-tenant relationship allows for faster remedies if the project doesn't go as planned in a land development agreement, which is sort of the way this is being structured, so that if there becomes a problem with the tenant and they're in the process of development, something to fall through or something else, which we don't expect with Civico, having ownership of the land makes that all a lot easier than having to reacquire the land and start over. It's another aspect of it.
Thank you for that clarification, Mina. Doesn't look like there's a question. Looks like there's a comment from Mr. Serbir. It also may be possible to share some portion of the residential and the public parking spaces. So Mr. Serbir is mentioning the fact of that shared parking is possible depending upon how the parking is split up. And again, Civico has shown willingness to cooperate with the parking ratio. You know, they feel anything that's over 0.75 clearly can you know, they're willing to talk about all of that. So that's just a point that John made. As of right now, I'm not seeing any other questions, but please feel free to, if something does pop into your head, to raise that hand or go into the question and answer function of the chat. Unfortunately, whatever you want to call it, I'm not seeing anybody itching to ask a question. I think Mike, it's back to you.
Thanks, Brian, and thanks everyone who attended. We'll be back at this next week, but as I mentioned, in the meantime, feel free to reach out to the town manager's office with questions, and select board members, or Brian as well, and we'll try to get to the best answers we can the soonest that we can. Again, thank you to everyone, and hopefully we'll see you soon. And I think if you look in the chat, Lisa's put the email address there, townmanager@winchester.us. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon.
Great, thanks. So yeah, on the 28th, it's just going to be a repeat of this presentation, with obviously the only difference being potentially different questions from the public. But it's the point is to just kind of do a repeat of this presentation and open up the floor. Oh, looks like there's one last question. There was a question submitted. It says there was a question submitted by William Band, but I believe it was answered. How many units count towards the 40B goal? That's been answered. And then what is the net impact on parking? That was also answered. So it looks like the only two questions that were by William Band have been answered. So I think we're all set. Anyway, if anyone has any further questions, you again, townmanager@winchester.us, like Lisa put in the chat, or you can, in addition, if you're available on the 28th, to come back and see us. So I hope everyone has a wonderful evening, and feel free to reach out with any further questions.